When you have a company, you need to know the three to five things that you're doing, and that's it. But you also have to have the success metrics that attach to each goal so that you can have an accurate history of, am I meeting those goals? Right? Because Mike always says that, us entrepreneurs like to tell ourselves stories, right? That fit our narrative or whatever we've pitched to our investors or to our parents and family, even. So having those success metrics really helps because you can go back to them, as well as that budget that helped you understand that very simple back of the napkin unit economics.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing Podcasts. Here's Kevin.
Hi, I'm Kevin Lee with the E-Marketing Association. I wear a bunch of other hats, most often of which is the Did It hat. I still run a digital marketing agency, which has been around since 1996 and pivoted probably a dozen or 15 times along the way. So that's one of the reasons I was super excited to chat with Michael and Kass, because I watched Buddy Media grow from before it was named Buddy Media and had alumni of Did It, including David Honig and perhaps others, work at Buddy Media. So I'm sort of familiar intimately with some of the stories you guys cover in the book. But let's start with the catalyst for the book, right? I went through three books and then pivoted to podcasts because I just got crazed by how hard book writing is. So maybe it was that you didn't realize how crazy it is to have to write and launch a book. But I'd love to hear what was the catalyst for you thinking it was a story that needed to be told.
I think for us, we being entrepreneurs and then investors and then even starting our own VC firm, we've helped so many people and we keep answering the same questions over and over that we really thought it was an opportunity to get our messages out there, all the cheat codes we wish we had, before we started our companies and scaled them, all the mistakes, and kind of bring it to a brutally honest, you know, um, writing style, if you will. I mean, that's why it's called shoveling shit, because we didn't want to sugarcoat anything. So the writing part wasn't as hard as the selling part.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it was crazy enough that I actually had book publishers give me an advance for two of my
Yep,
three books, and I think that only one of them paid itself back, so they're still on the hook.
exactly. You don't make money doing books.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. But yeah, you have to be driven by the story you want to get out there. And a lot of the theme of the book is about sort of, you mentioned the word cheat codes, but there's no one size fits all cheat code, right? And I think that's perhaps even more true now that the stuff that you're funding, the stuff that I'm funding, the stuff that I'm launching under my incubator, the tech side of things is getting pair coded by AI, not even by humans. I mean, it's one-tenth the coding energy. So, even since you wrote it or since you started funding companies, have has some of the advice changed even from the feedback you've gotten post book launch as you've chatted with even more entrepreneurs at book signings and out there promoting the book?
Well, we started writing the book 18 months ago. So, we had ChatGPT and AI was here. Maybe it wasn't here from the programmatic side like it is now, meaning like replacing engineers and programmers. But we tried to focus on cheat codes that, regardless of the time, whether you launch in 1900 or in the year 2400, they will be timeless. And regardless of the tools you have to focus. You have to build culture that matters. You have to really moneyball people, put people in the right positions, how you raise money. Maybe you have to raise less money in the future, but I can't see a world in which everyone who's born into the world has enough money to do everything that they want in their lifetime. So raising money, and which was a cheat code. And then, one of the most important things for both marketers and entrepreneurs is what happens when things don't go your way. You launch a company and a product that you think is going to be fantastic. You launch a marketing campaign that you think is going to take the market by storm. And all of a sudden you get the real data, and let's just say it doesn't go your way. How do you pivot an organization? How do you pivot your mind, yourself? How do you tell investors and employees that, you made a mistake where you thought the world was going? Actually, like it's not going there. Our products don't meet any need that we can uncover, or the marketing isn't resonating. And all of these things we think are timeless. If they aren't timeless, what a wonderful world we'll be living in.
So yeah, I'd love to get into the pivot side of things because that's something I've had to go through a bunch of times myself. And there's the whether or not to pivot, and there's the when to pivot, and there's the how to pivot. And on top of that, if you have investors, there's getting the buy-in from the investors. So given how frequently you hear the word and how it tends to come with baggage, right? Different people think of pivot as a negative. Some of the people think of pivot as a positive, and others think of it just as a fact of life. Like you may have to do it. So, what are some lessons that you would put out there that are either in the book or beyond what's in the book as it relates to navigating the pivot, timing the pivot, and communicating it internally to stakeholders and externally to investors?
Cass, you want to take that one?
I'll start. I mean, I think you probably know this, Kevin, better than anybody else. If you're already thinking about pivoting, you're probably too late, right?
Yeah.
So part of understanding when to pivot is making sure that you've set up the correct goals. Mike is just, you know, adamant about focus. And when you have a company, you need to know the three to five things that you're doing, and that's it. But you also have to have the success metrics that attach to each goal so that you can have an accurate history of, am I meeting those goals? Right? Because Mike always says that, us entrepreneurs like to tell ourselves stories, right? That fit our narrative or whatever we've pitched to our investors or to our parents and family, even. So having those success metrics really helps because you can go back to them, as well as that budget that helped you understand that very simple back of the napkin unit economics.
And when you start off focused, you basically are saying, this is where I want to go. Here are the 5 things, or 4 things, or 10 things, or 8 things I need to do to get there. And then you're really painting the picture of what success looks like. And too many entrepreneurs look at getting one deal as like success, because we look at like the good news and we ignore the other 99% of what's happening. And by setting those goals and painting the picture of success, like this is what success looks like, you can then go back in 9 months and say, actually, we have no customers, or no one has clicked on our ads, or no one has signed up, or 5 people, but we thought 100 people. And so you could be really, I think, honest with yourself, which is the hardest thing for many entrepreneurs. It's not convincing others, it's convincing yourself. And there's nothing like data to do that. And so if you start out focused and you have your goals, you have your metrics, pivoting is a lot easier. If you don't know where you're going and you don't know how to get there and you don't know what success looks like on the journey, you are going to have no idea when to pivot. You're just going to tell yourself stories, run out of money, sooner than you think you will, because you'll have no revenue.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've invested in some companies that I watched that happen to, and nothing's more exasperating when you come in as the investor and they say, "Oh, you're an expert in SEO. We'll definitely want your advice there," and then they ignore it. So
Yeah, I mean,
it's
that
really
happens all the time. It happens with every company, really, at the beginning, because, you know, starting a company is this process of going from dark to light. It's pitch black. You're walking around the room just looking for a handle to get out of this darkness, to get into a new room where maybe you're not a startup and it's not dark and you have more data, you have more information. And so the faster you can kind of fail, like, oh, that's not a door, that's like a chair, and get to the door, get to light, get data, and see the future, the better. And so people look at Buddy Media as like, oh, they $1 billion exit in 5 years. And blah, blah, blah. At the end of the day, we pivoted 4 times in the first year. Like, we launched stuff that, if you were to look back, maybe are some of the worst products in the history of products. Literally Ace Bucks. Yeah, we had a raffle program. We had, custom apps, which weren't bad, but it was like not scalable. And so you just have to get off of bad ideas because entrepreneurs look at failure as one step closer to succeeding, whereas many employees look at failure as, oh my God, my job is at stake. Very different mentality.
Yeah, I'd love to dig a little deeper onto sort of the intersection of something both of you mentioned, obviously having the right KPIs to judge your own success and having everyone bought into whatever those KPIs are super important. And then Cass, you mentioned unit economics, and it's funny because, I'm a limited partner in a couple of venture capital firms, and they tend to have very different philosophies. Often it's an East Coast, West Coast thing, and I'd love to have you argue with me if you disagree with this, but it's sort of like the East Coast mentality seems to be, it's all about the unit economics, right? And the West Coast mentality is, okay, it's all about scale, and we'll figure out the unit economics later, right? So get big first, then figure out your unit economics. I've always been a unit economics guy as an economist, right? But there's another mentality in startups because depending on what kind of startup you are, where the initial KPIs don't necessarily have a direct line to profitability, right? They're sort of there's a dotted line or a somewhat stringy line that if you follow it, maybe it leads to profitability. And so, do you sense that like different venture capital firms and different angel investors are either more or less focused on unit economics and on the whatever KPIs the are in the pitch deck?
Well, I think that's a way that, what you said has been true over the years. And the reason is many of the West Coast firms, which are really the original venture capital firms, looked at these businesses as winner take all. So if
Mm,
you look at everything from, even a desktop computer to, Uber and some of the really big businesses like Google, Facebook, these were like, only one company's going to own the social graph. One company is going to own this distributed like transportation network. And so you really use non-balance sheet money, so investor money, not capital is being generated by the operations of the business, to do whatever you could do to get scale to be the monopoly player. And
right.
many of those companies became the monopoly player. The vast majority of deals, especially today, as costs go down in terms of developing product, are not in winner take all markets. Even, Buddy Media, which had a big exit, we had 100 funded competitors because there was enough money in the marketing ecosystem as marketing shifted from TV to online and online into social. There was enough money for many, many companies, and three or four had substantial exits. We had the biggest one, but you had companies like Vitru and Wildfire and others that had good exits. The crazy part about the world we live in today is the trade-off is gone because you can get scale and unit economics using AI very fast. You look at companies like Lovable, right?
Yeah.
200 million of ARR, allowing people to use chat prompts to build applications. That is a company that in the past would have had to use very expensive databases. And, they built on top of all of these technologies such that, a handful of people can get to scale. I'm not saying a $10 million ARR business. I'm talking about hundreds of millions. I'm not talking about the language models, the core infrastructure. Obviously, the size of infrastructure investment that OpenAI and Google and Meta are making do not allow for that. So you're not going to have startups investing 15 billion in data centers, you know, without kind of having scale already, or at least money. But what you're talking about is like the Great Croft mentality, right? Like the mentality of these East Coast firms built by primarily East Coast entrepreneurs like Alan Patrickhoff and Ian Sigalo and others who are business builders. They look at the unit economics and they're not funding winner take all markets for the most part.
That's a great point. Anything to add to that, Cass?
No, Mike nailed it there. It's exactly what we're seeing.
Thank you, Kass. Did we get that on tape? She said I said something good.
Yeah, yeah. We'll clip
I
this one.
appreciate it.
Put it in your diary, Mike. So the I'd love to look pivot to the intersection between sort of the Moneyball chapter, but also the importance of HR, which I continue to learn that like even in a you could say it's even more amplified if a small business can become gigantic. Like from an
Yeah,
HR headcount perspective, it means you even more need the right people in the right
right.
roles, right? But when you have
Yeah,
redundancy, when there are 16 people in that role, right, and they
yeah,
were working as a team and there were some laggards in the team, you might not even notice the laggards, right? I mean,
right.
think about 5 years ago an agile Scrum tech team looks like, and what it looks like
Exactly.
when you've got one code or pair coding with a chat engine, right, or Lovable,
Right,
right? It's very different. So HR and Moneyball can become like it's a make or break, right?
right.
It's no longer a nice to have. So
Yeah.
how should people think about that, especially when it's an entrepreneur who realizes that they've got holes in what they're good at, right? Uh,
Well, let's start there. Let's just first hope that the founders know what they don't know, right? That's the biggest thing, and that's something that Mike and I always look for in investments is that the founders know their expertise and they're humble enough to hire around them so that they have their gaps filled. Now, if we assume that they do, then the second part that I always say to every company is after you hire your first employee, you are now responsible for HR. It's not just something that you need to like push off until 30, 40, 50 people. No, you better before you've hired that first person, you better know what your mission is, your values. What do you want in a culture? Like what does it feel like when you get on a Zoom or walk into an office or have a client meeting? What do you stand for? So too many times now companies just, especially these really agile and fast startups, they just think it's unnecessary and they have this really rigid point of view, especially when they have so much free access or inexpensive access to these no code platforms. And they just think like, oh, okay, so like I got a cheat code here, so to speak. I don't need to do anything on HR over here. And the truth is, it's the people at the end of the day that become your most valuable resource, right? So we need founders to really start, executing on HR from the beginning, not halfway down the road, because there will be cracks. And honestly, the generation of workers that are coming out right now, they really look at what's the new shiny coin, what's the new shiny company, and they don't have the same kind of loyalty that even we saw when we were running Buddy Media, where you'd see people switching jobs after 4 or 5 years, not 6 months or a year.
Yeah, that's a great point. I guess also the ultimate HR choice for a founder is if you have a business partner or business partners and the cap table as it relates to the workers, right, or your partners, operating partners.
Yeah.
That's key. And I've certainly, I don't know if I could say I've made mistakes there because I've actually found that in certain cases, the right partner at a certain stage of the business is different than the right partner another stage of the business. And I've you know had a bunch of partner stories I could do a separate podcast on.
Well,
Some of
you're
which,
absolutely right because it's all about scaling, right? Like
yeah,
someone might not make it when you've got 50 million ARR and you've got 500 employees, right? That might be the wrong person. That might be the wrong niche for that person. And that's when moneyballing, really comes into play is how do you put the right people in the right position? And there will be some sacrifices and it's unfortunate, but hopefully that's why people are using incentive programs with stock.
yeah. But what about when you find a situation where you have to moneyball somebody and they're like at a double digit equity position due to being an early founder? Is there any tips there?
So
We've
it's
had
not
that.
going to,
We've had
yeah,
that found that
but it's
issue.
not, yeah, it's not going to be easy.
Yeah.
I am convinced that if somebody can make it um, to a scaling position, and then they don't become a good fit, there is a place somewhere in the company for them.
Ah,
It might not be as senior, it might not be with as much responsibility, but at the end of the day, that's why I also say with HR, when people leave your company or you have to get rid of someone, you better do it with grace because they own part of your company and you want them leaving still rooting for you.
Yeah, that's a great
Still
point.
sending people, to work with you and in the marketplace being like, oh, I love that company.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Probably one that's missed by a lot of folks. We've certainly seen lots of situations where exits have not been graceful.
Right.
And I'm not sure if it's just luck or corporate culture or what, but even those folks that have left did it through not their own choice seem to still have a warm spot in their heart for us and still refer us business, which boggles my mind, right?
It's kind of awesome,
Yeah. So,
right?
so
You're doing you're
I
doing
don't
things
know.
right.
Well, again, but I don't know whether we did it right from the corporate culture once they were with us, or whether HR did such a good job hiring them, and that was just in their
It's a team
personality.
sport.
Yeah.
Listen, it's probably a little bit of all of it, but the fact that you were aware that it is important to have someone who can make sure you do things the right way. Any relationship. If you start it with care, you got to end it with care.
Right. Right. Great point. So let's talk a little bit more about sort of scaling, how scaling is different now than it was when you were at Buddy Media. I mean, even though a lot of startups are not marked up labor, in the end, there's a direct relationship between labor, your scaling speed for labor, and the scaling of the company, even if it's got an exponential relationship, like one more person generates 10 more million in ARR or whatever. So you still need to think that through. So how far ahead of need should people start thinking about that next hire, that next position, right? It's easy in biz dev roles because if as long as they pay for themselves, right, you're sort of like, okay, I'll bring them on anytime if they come with a Rolodex, but or come with the ability to drive sales. But outside of that, how far ahead should people be thinking with their HR planning? Oh,
So most of what we've done involves yearly planning. So I would encourage everyone to think in kind of what do we want to accomplish in a year? And I say a year because there's only so much you can do in a day, a week, a month, even a quarter. Before you snap your fingers, it's over. So where do I want to be in a year from now? And then what do I need to do to get there? And that will drive the hiring plan. And what has changed the most since Buddy Media is really this idea that you need to add more people to grow revenue. We're very enterprise sales driven. We had to add people to grow revenue. To get to 50 million in sales, we needed 40 salespeople. Each of them were doing a little over $1 million each. That has changed to much more product-led growth. You have to find product market fit earlier. Big companies are starting with trials of smaller software products earlier. And if the product doesn't sell itself, oftentimes it's not going to work, especially in marketing technology and in a world that is used to throwing things out. No one likes throwing things out more than CMOs, right? Like they buy a lot, they throw a lot out. Half of it doesn't work by definition. If they knew which half, they would never do it in the first place. And the other thing that we would recommend is you don't scale people until the current organization is just bursting at the seams. So if everyone is in the right position and just cannot handle more work, that is the time to scale. Too many companies scale too fast and then just waste money. They negotiate like crazy with a headhunter or real estate to save a few bucks, but they're happy to keep someone for 100 grand a year, for the whole year, just because they don't want to have a tough conversation, right? And so really think to yourself, is this person critical to the business? And we're in a world where companies more and more being in our world of tech and marketing technology, they're being valued just like any other company, a multiple of earnings, right? And so that's not only revenue, it's expenses. So you're getting 8 times profit, that $100,000 employee is costing you and your investors $800,000 of value. And so really think about that, internalize it, because we get so used to these budgets where it's like, oh, we're only burning 100,000 a month. It's like, okay, that's 1.2 million a year. Like, what if we were burning half of that, or if we were profitable? And too many entrepreneurs get comfortable, especially in the venture capital world where we have these safety nets because some of us went to good schools and venture. There's always another round of financing, and there's dumb money out there, and we don't have to get like super efficient. That just gets companies in their own way. I look at entrepreneurs like Gary Vaynerchuk who haven't raised money to actually fund the business. They're using customers, right? That's a real entrepreneur, not relying on investors, but relying on their own, ingenuity to sell a product in and use customer revenue to grow.
Yeah, I saw Gary Vee did the intro to your book, and that was awesome. He tells a great story in there. Um,
Yeah.
and people should buy the book to get the story. But I'd love to think through, once we bridge beyond the sort of advertising and SaaS and software ecosystems where, there's a lot of the lessons are very apropos there. A lot of the folks who may be considering buying this book are actually people in the more staid, more traditional businesses. Maybe it's a PE firm team that's looking at it because they want to apply the learnings of your book to established businesses that have not applied any of these best practices, and they're using it as a value engineering play as opposed to a startup play. So, what portions of the book should like the PE team or just a business owner who perhaps, went through sort of the round one of digital transformation, but hasn't done much else in the form of digital transformation, or hasn't done much from the business transformation perspective to, hasn't gone through a pivot, maybe they're in the construction industry or the old school real estate industry, which of course they went through a big change on the residential side due to some litigation recently. But a lot of these folks that might want to buy the book, they don't fit into the classical mold of, okay, yeah, I'm the entrepreneur in a rapidly growing hockey stick type of a business.
So one of the ideas behind the book is, it's why we call shoveling shit a love story. It's this idea that you get to work and just stuff hits the fan. People want to quit, customers want to quit, things don't go your way. And that suffering that's involved in kind of just shoveling and working hard is what you end up being addicted to and loving because that's where your purpose is. And
Right.
what has been most surprising, I think, that we didn't think about is this isn't just entrepreneurs. Anyone leading an organization, anyone trying to do something that involves growth and convincing other people and doing something that's truly innovative, which is a lot of companies these days, because if you don't innovate, you die. It's not only PE firms, it's pizza parlors. It's, oh, I have great pizza. What if I did, direct, to customer frozen pizzas, right? Oh, why am I losing my pizza maker every year? Well, maybe I should look at my culture, right? And so I think it's a combination of those cheat codes, but it is our love story and our love story to hard work. And most importantly, it's that there is no separation. If you're doing something truly important or that you love, it's hard to separate life and business, personal and we talk about that because we have very little separation. You're talking to a husband and wife team, we're best friends, we do everything together, and it's very hard for us to separate, right? And so how do you create an imbalanced life? There will never be balance, so don't even try to balance. But how do you create an imbalanced life that is worth living? And we talk about our three kids and the struggles and what it took, the sacrifices it took. And that's the stuff that really resonates, whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you are a VP of sales at a company or, you're making pizza at a pizza parlor.
Great point. So I do hope that a lot of those other folks who are passionate about their business and passionate about serving their target market, serving their customers, buy the book to apply the learnings to their journeys. Follow-up question really to that is, some folks on the entrepreneurship side, I run into this, when I've been mentoring students, they basically decide first that they're an entrepreneur and then they go try to find a problem to solve as opposed to the flip side, right? And I always found that interesting because I always, every one of my startups, every one of my businesses, voice to an AI powered voicemail drops, it's all because I couldn't find a solution to a problem. And I was like, I guess I'm going to have to build it then, right? And so, yeah, I thought I could do a better job than what else is out there at the same time. But, you know, can, can an entrepreneur decide first that they're going to be an entrepreneur and then find something? Or are
I don't,
those
s-
franchise
yeah,
owners basically?
I agree with you. I find it very, very odd, but I'm not surprised in this day and age with so many young people just kind of trying to cut corners. Like I could be an entrepreneur, I can be an entrepreneur tomorrow. And what we always say to every young person out there, what have you done? That will determine if you're an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
So I'm on the same exact page, Kevin.
I actually disagree with you guys, which I'm very shocked to disagree with such smart people. And the reason is because I think we're all born entrepreneurs. I don't know if you've met a baby, but they spend their waking life trying to get what they want. Like they have nothing, and their only tools are like yelling and going to the bathroom in their diaper and crying and being a pain in the ass. But at the end of the day, that's their tools to generate what they need, kind of food, comfort to live. Somehow along the process, people get the idea that you should be a lawyer, accountant. And I've met very few young people who dream of one day becoming an accountant. I love accountants. I'm not saying that it's not a bad thing. There's some people born to be an accountant, but I think, when you talk to kids about what they want when they're like 4, 5, 6, they want to go to the moon, they want to play sports, they want to kind of build something, right? And they want to do something that's kind of like exciting. We beat it out of them. And we basically say, sit down, shut up, do what you're told. They graduate, they realize there are no jobs. They're like, oh my God, how am I going to have a life that is actually like, matches my expectation? And if they had just tuned into their creativity and there's early kind of passions, they would have found a more purposeful life, I think.
I can't help but ask a follow-up then, because I sort of feel like we've seen a similar story before, right? So it's particularly when certain demographics and psychographics or demographics more importantly, like used to be that teens within a certain area, like their exit into success, for lack of a better term, was like sports or entertainment, sports or music, right? And now we've got sort of the same thing happen again, but it's being a creator, being an influencer, right?
Mm.
Because there's no different barrier to somebody, aspiring to be the next, Jimmy Donaldson, Mr. Beast, and not aspiring to be that. Now Jimmy spends an inordinate amount of his cash flow on his next production, which I think is insane, but that's him, right? That's his ethos. That's who he is.
Right.
And but yet, and so you now have this next group of folks, maybe starting with their early teen years or even earlier, where they're like, yeah, that's who I want to be. Like pick their influencer, because it used to be sports or music, but now there's this influencer category. And so do you feel like that gets beat out of the people as well by the educational institutions, by their parents? Or do you feel like there's a willingness for people to acknowledge that and let those kids explore and let them go try to be the influencer or be the creator?
Well, I don't know if you have experience trying to tell kids things, but they don't listen. You basically say
Far
something
too
and
much, yes.
and but what I love about the influencer and creator world is they're the ultimate entrepreneurs. They're putting out a product every day. They have immediate feedback, right, from their customers, so to speak.
Yeah.
And the good ones get very focused on that customer, and they have to show up, they have to record, they have to create the content, they have to try to monetize it if that's what they want.
Mhm.
And it's their own little microcosm of a business where they're not relying on anyone. It's an open playing field, anyone can compete. And it's not a surprise that the people who make it in that world also make it in the business world. So you look at Beast Burger and like all of, the Beast chocolate
Feastables,
and
yeah.
yeah, Beastable. So, and the reason is because not only do they have built-in marketing, but they're able to understand what those people want. Oh, my audience loves frozen pizza. I'm going to sell them Beast Pizza or whatever it is, because
Yeah.
you don't have to be Mr. Beast to do this, right? It's any influencer with kind of a tight network. And so, you know, social media in many ways has been a destructive force in our society, mental health, democracy, the list goes on. But it is the ultimate level playing field that if you're producing a great product, you will break through in a way that, like, you could be a great singer when we were growing up, but unless you knew the A&R guy at like this, label, or you got your big break, you know, surprise, surprise, algorithm don't care. Algorithms looking at data, it says, oh, this is good, that's bad. Whereas the AR guys, well, like, how many people passed on like Billie Eilish and Lady Gaga? A lot.
Yeah.
The algorithm wouldn't have. You don't think that Lady Gaga playing Lower East Side, when she was young, if Facebook and Instagram was around, she would have gone super global regardless.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting lesson there that we can apply to brands as well, right? So if creators are the ultimate meritocracy in the social media algorithm, where the cream rises to the top, right, algorithmically, brands can learn a huge lesson there, right? Because
Look at our
We're
investment
already
in,
seeing it.
yeah,
look at Liquid Death. We're
Yeah.
first money in
exactly.
Liquid Death.
Yeah,
They are a digital influencer that happens to monetize by selling flat water, carbonated water, soda replacements, teas, and just announced energy drinks next year.
yeah,
So it's a content platform that happens to monetize by like murdering your thirst.
yeah,
That's a big lesson going forward.
for sure. And I think that the tried and true brands that are used to just buying tonnage on TV, well, maybe not anymore, but
Well, let's take a look at what happened at Wimbledon. We forgot that whole example, right? You had a AI avatar having the most engagement and followers in the shortest period of time, and we still, I don't, do we know who was behind that yet, Mike? I don't think we do yet.
I haven't looked.
But
It doesn't
that was
matter. It's
just,
like
it doesn't matter. It's
it's
like crazy. And so you talk about like the influencers being at the center, that could really change the way people market entirely. Like it could reduce spend. Think about it. Instead of hiring these big celebrities and
for
putting
sure.
them up and the travel and the deals, let's just make up the perfect sponsor, the perfect person that's going to represent your brand.
Yeah, I mean it's very interesting. The junior people that I end up mostly, I have an HR team for the did it side, but on the nonprofit side, the volunteers often I'm
Yeah,
chatting with, and it's very interesting because there's definitely a segment of that generation that's anti-AI, right? Where consider all AI generated content to be slop. Nobody's ever even taught them prompt engineering unless they're in the engineering side of school. But if they're liberal arts majors, they've been told AI is cheating, don't use it, don't touch it, it's bad, right? And to some extent, there's a little bit of that ethos. So it's fascinating that obviously an AI influencer could take off within that ecosystem, right?
exactly. Yeah. I mean, it is weird that we're teaching kids to that using these productivity tools is cheating. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
and I think that's changing. I think we're,
I hope so.
you know,
Not necessarily in the universities still, but
I think
hopefully the
every
next.
technology is like that, right? Like
Yeah,
whoever invented like the eraser, they're probably like, oh, don't erase anything. That's illegal, right? Like, don't use a calculator, use your abacus. Don't like use spell check. Like that's like, I just think we're in these like periods where it's just different and we're scared of change. And especially us old people, we're like, well, this is the way we do it. So I say us old people, we used to be young. I feel young, but we're not. Look at us. Um, and eventually it's, and that's the AI generation. There's a generation that's never lived without it. What happens when, in 20 years that they're controlling Congress, right? Like,
yeah,
do we have AI representatives, which you just vote for an AI who represents you in all votes, right? It's true representative democracy.
Yeah,
That
because
stuff's happening.
well, we do live in interesting times, and I've used up a tremendous amount of your time, both of you. So thanks so much for joining me for the conversation. This is super fun.
Thank you so
Thanks
much
for
for
having
having us.
us.
I appreciate you and all of the prep work you did. I really appreciate all your questions.
And one of the great entrepreneurs of New York City. I mean, this,
Yeah,
you've been at it. I say, show up to work, do the same thing over and over again. You've been at it for many years. So it's congrats on that as
Yeah,
well.
well, same thing changed every year. So,
It always changes, but you head down doing what you're
head
yeah,
doing.
down,
So
absolutely. And
pivot, make it work.
and
Thank you
and
so
it's
much.
credit to my teams that did it and the other companies and me being a big delegator, which sometimes bites you in the butt. There's a separate podcast just on delegation, I think, but
hard.
we'll have to do that a different time. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.
And then you're really painting the picture of what success looks like. And too many entrepreneurs look at getting one deal as like success, because we look at like the good news and we ignore the other 99% of what's happening. And by setting those goals and painting the picture of success, like this is what success looks like, you can then go back in 9 months and say, actually, we have no customers, or no one has clicked on our ads, or no one has signed up, or 5 people, but we thought 100 people. And so you could be really, I think, honest with yourself, which is the hardest thing for many entrepreneurs. It's not convincing others, it's convincing yourself. And there's nothing like data to do that.